Marcus Thompson was like any other tourist visiting London for the first time. He had saved money for 2 years to make this trip happen, working double shifts at his construction job back in Ohio. The 28-year-old had always dreamed of seeing Buckingham Palace, Tower Bridge, and all the famous places he had only seen in movies and photographs. On a sunny Tuesday morning in July, Marcus walked through the bustling streets of London with his camera hanging around his neck and a guidebook tucked under his arm. He wore his favorite Ohio State t-shirt, blue jeans, and white sneakers that were already getting dirty from all the walking he had done since arriving 3 days earlier. Marcus had planned his entire itinerary around this moment, visiting Buckingham Palace and seeing the famous Queen's Guards in their tall black hats and red uniforms. He had read about them online and watched countless videos on social media, but nothing could prepare him for seeing them in person. As he approached the palace gates, Marcus felt his heart racing with excitement. The magnificent building stood before him like something from a fairy tale, with its grand architecture and perfectly manicured gardens. Tourists from all over the world were taking pictures, chatting in different languages and marveling at the sight just like he was. The Queen's Guards stood at their posts, completely still and silent. Their red tunics were pristine, their black bearskin hats towered above their heads, and their faces showed no emotion whatsoever. Marcus was fascinated by how they could stand so perfectly still, like living statues. He spent the first hour taking pictures from a respectful distance, just like all the other tourists. Marcus captured shots of the guards from different angles, the palace facade, and even took some selfies with the palace in the background. He was having the time of his life, and everything was going perfectly according to his plan. But as the morning wore on, Marcus began to notice something that bothered him. He watched as other tourists got closer and closer to the guards trying to get the perfect photo. Some people were talking loudly right next to them. Others were making funny faces, and a few even tried to touch their uniforms or weapons. What surprised Marcus the most was that the guards never reacted. They stood there like robots, completely ignoring everything happening around them. Their eyes stared straight ahead, their breathing was barely noticeable, and they never once moved or acknowledged the crowd of people surrounding them. Marcus had always been the type of person who liked to push boundaries and test limits. Back home in Ohio, his friends knew him as the guy who would take dares and do crazy things just to get a reaction, or make people laugh. He was not mean-spirited, but he had always been curious about what would happen if he crossed certain lines. As he watched the guards maintain their perfect composure despite all the chaos around them, Marcus began to wonder what it would take to make one of them break character. He started thinking about all the videos he had seen online where people tried to make the guards laugh or move, and most of the time, nothing happened. The idea started small in his mind. Maybe he could just get a little closer than the other tourists. Maybe he could say something funny that might make one of them smile. Marcus told himself it would just be harmless fun, and he could get an amazing story to tell his friends back home. He noticed that there was one guard in particular who seemed to be getting the most attention from tourists. This guard was positioned near the main entrance, and people were constantly walking by him, taking pictures and trying to interact with him. The guard was tall and looked to be in his early 30s, with a serious expression that never wavered despite all the activity around him. Marcus decided this would be his target. He walked over casually, pretending to just be another tourist taking pictures. He started by standing a few feet away just like everyone else and took some normal photos. The guard paid no attention to him whatsoever. Feeling bolder, Marcus stepped a little closer. Still no reaction from the guard. He tried making a funny face while taking a selfie, hoping to catch the guard's attention in his peripheral vision. Nothing happened. The guard continued to stare straight ahead as if Marcus did not exist at all. This lack of response only made Marcus more determined. He had come all this way, spent all this money, and he was not going to leave London without getting some kind of reaction from one of these famous guards. In his mind, he was just trying to have some fun and create a memorable moment from his vacation. Marcus began to formulate a plan. He would start with something small and harmless just to test the waters. If that did not work, he would gradually escalate until he got some kind of response. He figured that at worst someone would just tell him to back off, and he would apologize and walk away. What Marcus did not understand was that the Queen's guards were not just tourist attractions or performers putting on a show. They were real soldiers with real responsibilities, highly trained military personnel who took their duties extremely seriously. Their job was not entertainment. It was protecting one of the most important buildings in the entire United Kingdom. He also did not realize that there were strict rules and protocols in place regarding interactions with the guards, and that crossing certain lines could have serious consequences. The guards had the authority to take action when necessary, and they were trained to respond appropriately to different situations. As Marcus stood there planning his next move, he was completely unaware that several other people were watching him. Palace security officers, both in uniform and plain clothes, were positioned throughout the area, constantly monitoring the crowd for any potential problems or security threats. The stage was set for what would become the most shocking and embarrassing experience of Marcus Thompson's life. His innocent desire for a memorable vacation photo was about to spiral into a situation that would teach him a lesson he would never forget about respecting boundaries and understanding the serious nature of some traditions. Little did Marcus know that his next actions would not only get him in serious trouble, but would also be captured on video by other tourists and shared across social media platforms, making him famous for all the wrong reasons. Marcus decided to start with something he thought would be completely harmless. He walked up to the guard and stood right next to him, close enough that their shoulders were almost touching. He figured this would surely get some kind of reaction, even if it was just a subtle glance or a slight movement. The guard remained perfectly still, staring straight ahead, as if Marcus was not even there. This actually impressed Marcus more than it annoyed him. He had never seen anyone with such incredible self-control and discipline, but instead of taking this as a sign to respect the guard's professionalism, it only made him more curious about what would finally break that composure. Marcus tried talking to the guard in a friendly voice. "Hey there, buddy. Beautiful day, isn't it? I'm from Ohio in America. This is my first time in London." He spoke normally at first, just like he was talking to any other person on the street. No response. The guard's eyes never moved from their fixed position straight ahead. His breathing remained steady and controlled, and not a single muscle in his face twitched. Other tourists began to notice Marcus and started gathering around to watch what he would do next. Some of them pulled out their phones to record, thinking they might witness something funny or interesting. A few people in the crowd encouraged Marcus with smiles and nods, while others looked concerned about what he might do. Feeling emboldened by the audience, Marcus decided to try something a bit more attention-grabbing. He started making silly faces right in front of the guard's face, contorting his expression into exaggerated smiles, frowns, and surprised looks. He even tried crossing his eyes and sticking out his tongue. Still nothing. The guard was like a statue carved from stone. Marcus then tried waving his hands in front of the guard's face, careful not to actually touch him, but getting close enough that it would be impossible to ignore. He moved his hands back and forth, up and down, even snapping his fingers near the guard's ears. The crowd was getting larger now, and Marcus was starting to enjoy being the center of attention. He felt like a performer putting on a show, and the fact that he was getting no reaction from the guard was actually making the whole thing more entertaining for everyone watching. What Marcus failed to notice was that while the guard was not reacting outwardly, his trained eyes were tracking every movement. The guard was fully aware of Marcus's presence and actions, but he was following his strict training and protocols. However, the guard was also mentally noting everything that was happening and preparing to respond appropriately if the situation escalated. Marcus decided to try verbal provocation next. He started telling jokes right next to the guard's ear, speaking loudly enough for everyone around to hear. "Why don't you ever smile? Are you having a bad day? Did someone steal your sense of humor along with your ability to move?" Some people in the crowd laughed at Marcus's jokes, which only encouraged him to continue. He was starting to feel like he was winning some kind of game, even though the guard had not acknowledged his existence in any way. "I bet you're dying to laugh right now," Marcus continued. "I bet underneath that serious face you're cracking up. Come on, just give me a little smile. Nobody will tell your boss." The guard's expression remained completely unchanged. His eyes stayed focused on the same distant point, his posture remained perfectly straight, and his breathing continued at the same steady pace. Marcus was beginning to get frustrated. He had been at this for nearly 20 minutes, and he had not gotten even the tiniest reaction. He started to feel like he was being personally challenged by the guard's incredible self-control. "Okay, you're good," Marcus said, stepping back slightly. "I've got to admit I'm impressed, but I'm not giving up yet." He decided to try physical comedy next. Marcus began doing an exaggerated march next to the guard, lifting his knees high and swinging his arms dramatically. He was mimicking what he thought a guard's march would look like, but in a silly, over-the-top way. The crowd was eating it up. More people had gathered to watch, and many were recording everything on their phones. Marcus was getting more laughs and encouragement from the audience, which made him feel like he was putting on the best show of his life. But what Marcus did not realize was that some of the people watching were not amused. Several British tourists in the crowd were starting to look uncomfortable and disapproving. They understood the significance and seriousness of the Queen's Guard in a way that Marcus, as a foreign visitor, simply did not grasp. One elderly British woman shook her head and said to her husband, "That American tourist is going too far. Someone should stop him before he gets himself into real trouble." Her husband nodded in agreement. "These guards are not entertainers. They're soldiers doing their job. That young man has no idea what he's playing with." But Marcus was too caught up in the moment to notice the disapproving looks from some members of the crowd. All he could focus on was the challenge in front of him. This impossibly disciplined guard who refused to break character, no matter what he did. He tried making loud noises, clapping his hands, and even doing jumping jacks right next to the guard. Each escalation brought more laughter from part of the crowd, and more concern from others who understood the situation better. Marcus was about to cross a line that would change everything. He was reaching the point where his actions would go from merely annoying and disrespectful to actually interfering with the guard's ability to do his job effectively. The guard, meanwhile, was making mental notes of every single thing Marcus had done. He was trained to remember details and assess threat levels, even while maintaining his stoic exterior. Although Marcus's behavior was not threatening in a security sense, it was becoming disruptive enough to potentially require action. Palace security officers positioned around the area were also watching the situation develop. They were in communication with each other through discreet earpieces, discussing whether intervention was necessary. So far, they had decided to let the situation play out, but they were ready to step in at a moment's notice. Marcus had no idea that he was being watched by multiple security personnel, or that his actions were being carefully evaluated and documented. In his mind, this was all just harmless, fun, a tourist trying to get a memorable photo and story to take back home. He was about to learn that there was nothing harmless about disrespecting a Queen's Guard in front of one of the most important buildings in Britain. The consequences of his next actions would shock him more than anything he could have imagined. Marcus decided it was time to take things to the next level. The crowd had grown to about 30 people, and he felt like he was putting on the performance of a lifetime. He had come this far without getting any reaction, so he figured he might as well try something that would definitely get the guard's attention. Without thinking about the consequences, Marcus reached out and gently poked the guard's arm with his finger. It was not aggressive or violent, just a light tap, like someone trying to get a friend's attention. In Marcus's mind, it was barely more than a friendly touch. The moment his finger made contact with the guard's uniform, everything changed. The guard's head snapped toward Marcus with lightning speed, his eyes locking onto the tourist's face with an intensity that made Marcus's blood run cold. For the first time since Marcus had been standing there, the guard acknowledged his existence, and the look in his eyes was absolutely terrifying. "Step back," the guard shouted in a voice so loud and commanding that it seemed to echo off the palace walls. The sound was like a thunderclap, completely shattering the playful atmosphere that had been building for the past 20 minutes. Marcus jumped backward so quickly that he nearly fell over his own feet. His heart was suddenly pounding in his chest, and all the confidence he had been feeling just seconds before evaporated instantly. The guard's voice was not just loud, it was filled with authority and power that made Marcus feel like a small child being scolded by an angry parent. But the guard was not finished. In one fluid motion, he brought his rifle down from his shoulder and pointed it directly at Marcus. The weapon was not loaded with live ammunition for crowd control situations like this, but Marcus had no way of knowing that. All he could see was the barrel of a military rifle aimed straight at his chest. "Do not touch the Queen's Guard," the soldier bellowed, his voice carrying across the entire courtyard area. "Step back immediately or face the consequences." The crowd that had been laughing and encouraging Marcus just moments before suddenly went completely silent. People began stepping backward, some of them gasping in shock at how quickly the situation had escalated. Several tourists started moving away from the area entirely, not wanting to be anywhere near what was obviously becoming a serious incident. Marcus raised his hands in the air, his face pale with fear and shock. I'm sorry. I didn't mean anything by it," he stammered, his voice shaking. "I was just trying to be friendly." The guard maintained his threatening posture, rifle still pointed at Marcus, his eyes never leaving the tourist's face. "Move away from this area now," he commanded. "You have interfered with a Queen's Guard in the performance of his duties." By now, palace security officers were moving in from multiple directions. Marcus could see uniformed guards approaching from his left and right, while plainclothes security personnel were also making their way through the crowd toward him. The reality of his situation was finally hitting Marcus like a freight train. This was not a game or a tourist attraction. He had just assaulted a real soldier, who was doing a real job protecting one of the most important buildings in the United Kingdom. The friendly, harmless fun he thought he was having had suddenly turned into a potential international incident. "Sir, please put your hands where we can see them and do not make any sudden movements," said one of the security officers as he approached Marcus from behind. The officer's voice was calm but firm, and Marcus could tell that he was dealing with highly trained professionals who were taking this situation very seriously. Marcus kept his hands raised and tried to explain himself. "I'm just a tourist from America. I didn't know I wasn't supposed to touch him. I was just trying to have some fun and take some pictures." "Touching a Queen's Guard without permission is a serious offense, sir," the security officer replied. "We're going to need you to come with us so we can sort this out properly." The guard with the rifle maintained his position for several more seconds, making sure that Marcus was being properly handled by security, before slowly returning to his original stance. However, his eyes continued to track Marcus's movements, ready to react again if necessary. Marcus looked around desperately at the crowd, hoping someone would speak up for him or explain that he had not meant any harm. But most of the tourists were either filming the incident or backing away to avoid getting involved. The few people who made eye contact with him looked at him with a mixture of pity and disapproval. One American tourist in the crowd shook his head and said to his wife, "That guy just made all of us Americans look bad. Why would anyone think it's okay to touch one of these guards?" His wife replied, "I feel embarrassed just watching this. Those guards are soldiers, not entertainers. That man should have known better." As the security officers began to escort Marcus away from the guard post, he could hear people in the crowd talking about what they had just witnessed. Some were expressing shock at how quickly things had escalated, while others were saying that Marcus had gotten exactly what he deserved for being so disrespectful. "Did you see how fast that guard moved?" one person said. "One second he was like a statue, and the next second he had that rifle pointed right at that guy's chest." "That American tourist is lucky he didn't get arrested," another person commented. "In some countries, touching a guard like that could get you thrown in prison." Marcus felt his cheeks burning with embarrassment and shame. What had started as what he thought would be a fun and memorable experience was turning into the most humiliating moment of his entire life. He could see people pointing their phones at him, recording everything that was happening. He realized that this incident was probably going to end up all over social media, and people back home in Ohio would soon see him being marched away by palace security after being threatened by an angry Queen's Guard with a rifle. The security officers were professional and polite, but they made it clear that Marcus was in serious trouble. "We'll need to take you to our security office to fill out some paperwork and have a conversation about what just happened here," one of them explained as they walked. Marcus wanted to protest that it had all been a misunderstanding, that he had not meant any harm, and that he was just a tourist who had made an innocent mistake. But the words seemed to stick in his throat as he realized how foolish his behavior had been. He was about to learn that the consequences of his actions would extend far beyond just a stern talking to from palace security. This incident was going to follow him for much longer than he could have ever imagined. Marcus was escorted through a side entrance of Buckingham Palace into a small, windowless security office. The room was stark and official-looking, with white walls, fluorescent lighting, and a metal desk with 2 chairs. It felt more like a police interrogation room than anything Marcus had expected to see inside the famous palace. 2 security officers sat across from him, while a third remained standing by the door. The lead officer, a serious-looking man in his 40s with graying hair, pulled out a clipboard and began asking Marcus questions about his personal information. Full name, please, the officer said in a crisp British accent. Marcus James Thompson, Marcus replied, his voice still shaking slightly from the shock of what had just happened. Age and nationality? 28 American. I'm from Columbus, Ohio. The officer continued writing on his forms. Purpose of your visit to the United Kingdom? Just tourism, Marcus said. This is my first time in London. I saved up for 2 years to take this trip. As the questioning continued, Marcus began to understand just how serious his situation had become. The officers explained that touching a Queen's Guard without permission was considered assault under British law. They told him that the guards were active duty soldiers with the legal authority to use force to protect themselves and the royal property they were guarding. The guard you touched is a member of the Grenadier Guards, one of the most elite infantry regiments in the British Army, the lead officer explained. These men are not performers or tourist attractions. They are highly trained soldiers carrying out important security duties. Marcus felt his stomach drop as the full weight of his mistake became clear. I honestly didn't know, he said. I thought they were just, I don't know, like the guys dressed up as superheroes in Times Square back home. I thought it was all for show. The officer looked at him with a mixture of disbelief and pity. Mr. Thompson, these guards protect some of the most important people and places in our country. They undergo rigorous military training and serve with distinction in combat zones around the world. Treating them like entertainment is deeply offensive to both the guards themselves and to the British people. While the questioning continued, Marcus could hear activity in the hallway outside. Officers were coming and going, and he could hear radio chatter about the incident. It was becoming clear that his actions had caused quite a disturbance, and that multiple people were now involved in dealing with the situation. After about an hour of paperwork and questioning, the lead officer informed Marcus that they had reviewed security camera footage of the entire incident. We have clear video evidence of your behavior leading up to the moment you made physical contact with the guard, he said. The footage shows approximately 20 minutes of increasingly disruptive behavior before the actual assault occurred. Marcus winced at the word assault. It sounded so harsh and criminal when applied to what he had thought was just a playful poke. The officer continued. We're also aware that multiple tourists recorded the incident on their phones. Some of this footage is already being shared on social media platforms. This news hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. He had been so focused on the immediate consequences of his actions that he had not fully considered the long-term implications. Now he was facing the possibility that his embarrassing encounter with the Queen's Guard would be seen by thousands or even millions of people online. What happens now? Marcus asked, dreading the answer. Under normal circumstances, we would charge you with assault and turn you over to the Metropolitan Police, the officer replied. However, given that you are a tourist who appears to have acted out of ignorance rather than malice, and considering that no actual harm was done, we have some discretion in how we handle this matter. Marcus felt a small spark of hope, but the officer was not finished. Here are your options, Mr. Thompson. Option 1. We can proceed with formal charges, which would likely result in your arrest, a court appearance, possible fines or jail time, and definitely a permanent record of criminal activity in the UK that would affect any future travel to this country. Marcus's face went pale. The idea of being arrested and thrown into a British jail was terrifying enough, but the thought of having a criminal record that would follow him for the rest of his life was even worse. Option 2, the officer continued, is that we can issue you with a formal warning and ban you from all royal properties for the remainder of your stay in the United Kingdom. This would include Buckingham Palace, Windsor Castle, the Tower of London, and any other location under royal jurisdiction. While this option was clearly better than being arrested, it still meant that Marcus would be unable to visit many of the places he had traveled thousands of miles to see. His carefully planned vacation was essentially ruined. There is also a third option, the officer said, and Marcus looked up hopefully. We can arrange for you to meet with the guard you assaulted, provided he agrees to it. You would have the opportunity to apologize directly to him and learn more about his role and the importance of what he does. If he accepts your apology and vouches for your character, we might be willing to reduce the restrictions on your movements during the rest of your visit. Marcus jumped at this opportunity. Yes, please. I would love to apologize to him properly. I really didn't mean any disrespect, and I want him to know that. The officer made a note on his paperwork. I'll need to speak with the guard first to see if he's willing to meet with you. His name is Lance Corporal William Davies, and he's been serving with the Grenadier Guards for 6 years. He's actually done 3 tours of duty in Afghanistan, so he's seen real combat and understands the serious nature of military service. Learning about the Guard's military background made Marcus feel even worse about his behavior. This was not just someone playing dress-up for tourists. This was a real soldier who had risked his life serving his country in dangerous places around the world. The officer left the room to speak with Lance Corporal Davies, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts for the first time since the incident. He sat there thinking about how badly he had misjudged the situation and how his desire for a memorable vacation experience had led to such serious consequences. When the officer returned 20 minutes later, he had news that surprised Marcus. Lance Corporal Davies has agreed to meet with you, he said. However, he has some conditions. The meeting will take place here in this office with security personnel present. You will listen to what he has to say about his service and his role as a Queen's Guard. You will then have the opportunity to apologize, and he will decide whether he believes your apology is genuine. Marcus nodded eagerly. Yes, absolutely. I'll do whatever he wants. If he accepts your apology, the officer continued, we'll reduce your punishment to a written warning and a temporary ban from Buckingham Palace only. You'll still be able to visit other royal sites during your stay. However, if he feels that your apology is not sincere, or that you still don't understand the seriousness of what you did, we'll proceed with the full ban from all royal properties. Marcus knew this was his one chance to salvage something from his vacation and to make things right with the guard he had wronged. He was about to come face to face with the man he had disrespected, and he would need to find the right words to convince him that he truly understood his mistake and was genuinely sorry for his actions. 20 minutes later, the door to the security office opened and Lance Corporal William Davies walked in. Marcus was shocked by how different the guard looked without his ceremonial uniform. Davies was wearing standard military fatigues and appeared much younger than Marcus had expected, probably only a few years older than himself. What struck Marcus immediately was that Davies was not the imposing, intimidating figure he had seemed when pointing that rifle. He was actually quite average in height and build, with brown hair and intelligent eyes. But there was something in his bearing, a quiet confidence and dignity, that commanded respect. Davies sat down across from Marcus and looked him directly in the eye. When he spoke, his voice was calm and measured, completely different from the thunderous commands he had shouted earlier. Mr. Thompson, Davies began, I understand you wanted to meet with me to apologize for what happened today. Yes, sir, Marcus replied quickly. I want you to know how sorry I am. I had no idea that what I was doing was wrong or disrespectful. I thought the guards were just... Well, I didn't really think about it properly. Davies nodded slowly. Before you continue with your apology, I'd like you to understand exactly who you were interacting with today and why your actions were problematic. For the next 15 minutes, Davies told Marcus about his military service. He explained that he had joined the British Army at 18 and had served in some of the most dangerous areas of Afghanistan. He had been shot at, had seen friends wounded and killed, and had risked his life countless times protecting British interests and helping Afghan civilians. The Queen's Guard is not a costume or a performance, Davies explained. It's a posting that comes after years of rigorous training and proven service. Every man who stands guard at these royal residences has earned the right to be there through dedication, sacrifice, and demonstrated courage. Marcus listened intently, beginning to understand for the first time the true significance of what he had witnessed and interfered with. Davies continued, When I'm standing guard, I'm not just standing there for tourists to look at. I'm responsible for the security of one of the most important buildings in Britain. I have to be constantly alert for real threats while maintaining the discipline and bearing that represents centuries of military tradition. I had no idea, Marcus said quietly. I just saw the uniform in the ceremony and I thought it was all about entertaining tourists. That's exactly the problem, Davies replied. Too many visitors see us as living museum pieces or street performers. They don't understand that we're active duty soldiers with real responsibilities. When you were making faces and waving your hands in front of my face, you were interfering with my ability to do my job properly. Davies leaned forward in his chair. Do you know what I was thinking about while you were trying to get my attention? Marcus shook his head. I was watching the crowd for suspicious behavior. I was monitoring the security perimeter. I was staying alert for any signs of trouble. That's what I'm trained to do, and that's what the British people expect from me. Your antics were not just annoying. They were actually compromising my ability to protect the palace and the people around it. This explanation hit Marcus like a revelation. He had been so focused on the idea of getting a reaction from the guard that he had never considered that the guard had serious work to do. When you touched me, Davies continued, you crossed a line that forced me to respond. In that moment, I had to treat you as a potential threat, because anyone who would ignore all social boundaries and make physical contact with an armed soldier could be dangerous. Marcus felt his cheeks burning with shame. I never thought of it that way. I was just trying to be friendly. Mr. Thompson, let me ask you something, Davies said. Back in America, would you walk up to a police officer and start poking him while he was trying to do his job? No, of course not, Marcus replied immediately. Then why did you think it was acceptable to do that to me? Marcus struggled to find an answer. I guess I didn't think of you as a real policeman or soldier. I thought you were more like an actor playing a role. Davies nodded. That's honest, at least. But it shows a fundamental misunderstanding of what you were seeing. Everything about our uniforms, our weapons, our training, our protocols, it's all real. The only thing that's ceremonial is the setting. The room was quiet for a moment as Marcus absorbed what he was being told. Davies then said something that surprised Marcus. I want you to know that I don't hold any personal anger toward you. You're clearly not a bad person, and you obviously didn't intend any real harm. But your actions today were disrespectful not just to me personally, but to every soldier who has worn this uniform and to the institution we represent. I understand that now, Marcus said, and I'm genuinely sorry. If I could go back and do it differently, I would. I would have just taken my pictures from a respectful distance and left you alone to do your job. Davies studied Marcus's face for several seconds, as if trying to determine whether the apology was sincere. Mr. Thompson, I have one more thing to tell you, and I want you to listen carefully. Marcus nodded. The reason I agreed to meet with you is not just to hear your apology. It's because I think you represent a lot of tourists who come here with good intentions, but without proper understanding of what they're seeing. If you can learn from this experience and maybe share that knowledge with other people, then some good might come from what happened today. Davies stood up and extended his hand to Marcus. I accept your apology, Mr. Thompson. I believe you're genuinely sorry and that you understand your mistake. Marcus shook the soldier's hand, feeling an enormous sense of relief and gratitude. However, Davies added, I want you to understand that forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. You made a serious error in judgment, and there will still be some restrictions on your activities during the rest of your visit. The security officer who had been quietly observing the conversation spoke up. Mr. Thompson, based on Lance Corporal Davies's recommendation, we're prepared to limit your restrictions to a written warning and a ban from Buckingham Palace grounds only. You'll be free to visit other royal sites, but you'll not be permitted to return here during your current trip. Marcus felt both disappointed and relieved. He was grateful that the consequences were not worse, but he was sad that he would not be able to see more of Buckingham Palace or witness the famous changing of the guard ceremony he had read so much about. As the meeting concluded, Davies had one final piece of advice for Marcus. When you get back to America, I hope you'll tell people about what you learned today. Help other tourists understand that the Queen's Guards are real soldiers deserving of respect, not entertainment for visitors. Marcus promised that he would, and he meant it. This experience had taught him a lesson about respect, cultural awareness, and the importance of understanding the significance of what you're observing when you travel to other countries. Marcus left the palace security office with his written warning and a completely different perspective on his London vacation. As he walked through the streets back to his hotel, he felt a mixture of embarrassment, relief, and genuine respect for Lance Corporal Davies and what he represented. The first thing Marcus did when he got back to his hotel room was check his phone. His worst fears were confirmed. Multiple videos of his encounter with the Queen's Guard were already circulating on social media. One video, taken by a tourist, standing nearby, showed the entire sequence from his silly antics to the moment the guard pointed his rifle at him. The video had been shared hundreds of times already, with comments ranging from people laughing at his expense to others criticizing his behavior as disrespectful and embarrassing. Some commenters were defending him, saying he was just having fun, while others were calling him an ugly American tourist who gave all Americans a bad reputation abroad. Marcus read through the comments with growing horror. People were identifying him by name, sharing the video to their own social media accounts, and making jokes about the incident. Within hours, the video had thousands of views and was spreading rapidly across different platforms. His phone started buzzing with text messages and calls from friends and family back home in Ohio. Word had already reached Columbus about what had happened, and people wanted to know if the person in the viral video was really him. Marcus's mother called, sounding worried and confused. "Marcus, honey, your cousin Jenny sent me a video that looks like you getting in trouble with some British soldiers. Please tell me that's not really you." Marcus had to explain the entire situation to his mother, who was mortified that her son had behaved so poorly while representing America abroad. She made him promise to write a proper letter of apology to the British embassy when he got home. His best friend Mike texted him saying, "Dude, you're famous, but maybe not in the way you wanted to be. That guard looked like he was ready to arrest you or worse." The viral nature of the video meant that Marcus's embarrassing mistake was being seen by far more people than just the tourists who had witnessed it in person. The incident was being shared and reshared across the internet, with new people discovering it every hour. Marcus spent the rest of that evening in his hotel room, feeling deeply ashamed and wondering if he should just cut his vacation short and fly home immediately. He had come to London to create happy memories, and instead he had created an international incident that was now being broadcast to the world. But something unexpected began happening over the next few days. As Marcus continued his vacation, visiting the Tower of London, Westminster Abbey, and other sites he was still allowed to see, he found himself becoming an advocate for respectful tourism. At the Tower of London, Marcus overheard an American family making jokes about trying to get a reaction from the yeoman warders. Without thinking, he approached them and politely explained what he had learned about the seriousness of these roles and the importance of treating them with respect. "These aren't actors," Marcus told them. "They're real people with real jobs, and they deserve to be treated with dignity. Trust me, I learned that lesson the hard way." He showed them some of the photos he had taken from a respectful distance and explained how you could still get great pictures and have memorable experiences without being disruptive or disrespectful. The family thanked him for the advice, and Marcus realized that his embarrassing experience was actually helping him educate other tourists about appropriate behavior. At Westminster Abbey, he noticed a group of teenagers trying to take selfies in areas where photography was prohibited. Instead of ignoring them, Marcus gently approached and explained the rules, sharing how important it was to respect the sacred nature of the place and the guidelines set by the staff. During his visit to Windsor Castle, Marcus witnessed another tourist arguing with security about getting closer to restricted areas. Drawing from his recent experience, Marcus helped explain to the visitor why the security measures were necessary and how they could still enjoy their visit while following the rules. Each time Marcus helped other tourists understand appropriate behavior, he felt like he was making small amends for his own mistake. He began to see that his viral video incident, while embarrassing, was serving as a powerful teaching tool for others. As the days passed, Marcus began to see his viral video incident in a different light. Yes, it was embarrassing, and yes, it would probably follow him around the internet for a long time. But it was also teaching people important lessons about cultural respect and appropriate tourist behavior. Marcus decided to take control of his own narrative. He wrote a long social media post explaining what had happened, what he had learned, and how other tourists could avoid making the same mistakes he had made. He talked about Lance Corporal Davies's service record, the true purpose of the Queen's Guards, and the importance of understanding local customs and traditions when traveling. The post went viral almost as quickly as the original video, but this time the reaction was mostly positive. People appreciated his honesty about his mistake and his efforts to turn the incident into a teaching moment. Several military veterans commented to thank him for helping people understand the seriousness of military service. Lance Corporal Davies himself somehow saw Marcus's post and sent him a private message saying, "Well done, Mr. Thompson. This is exactly what I hoped would come from our conversation." By the time Marcus returned to Ohio, the original video of his encounter had been viewed over 1 million times, but his follow-up explanation and apology had also been seen by hundreds of thousands of people. He had accidentally become an internet spokesperson for respectful tourism. The experience had changed Marcus in ways he never expected. Back home in Columbus, he found himself much more thoughtful about his interactions with people in service positions. He treated police officers, security guards, and military personnel with a new level of respect and understanding. Marcus was invited to speak at local travel clubs and community groups about his London experience. He would show both videos, the embarrassing original and his thoughtful response, and talk about the lessons he had learned about cultural awareness and respect when traveling abroad. Several months later, Marcus received an unexpected email from the British Embassy in Washington. They had seen his videos and his subsequent advocacy for respectful tourism, and they wanted to invite him to participate in a cultural exchange program aimed at educating American tourists about British customs and traditions. Marcus accepted the invitation and eventually became involved in creating educational materials for American visitors to the UK. His embarrassing mistake had turned into an opportunity to help thousands of other tourists have more respectful and meaningful experiences when visiting Britain. Years later, Marcus would still occasionally meet people who recognized him as that guy from the Queen's Guard video. But instead of being embarrassed, he had learned to use these encounters as opportunities to share what he had learned about respect, cultural awareness, and the importance of understanding the true significance of the places and traditions we visit when we travel. The incident that had started as a quest for a memorable vacation photo had indeed given Marcus something unforgettable, but not in the way he had originally intended. It had taught him that the most meaningful travel experiences come not from trying to get attention or create viral moments, but from approaching other cultures with genuine respect, curiosity, and humility. Lance Corporal Davies continued his service with the Grenadier Guards, and though he never sought recognition for his patient handling of the situation, his example of professionalism and dignity under pressure became part of the training materials used to prepare new guards for dealing with difficult tourist situations. The video of Marcus's encounter with the Queen's Guard remained on the internet as a permanent reminder of what not to do when visiting royal sites in Britain, but it also became an educational tool, helping countless other tourists understand the importance of treating military personnel and cultural institutions with the respect they deserve. In the end, Marcus's moment of poor judgment had consequences that extended far beyond anything he could have imagined when he first approached that guard with the intention of getting a simple reaction. The shock of those consequences had transformed not only his own understanding of respectful travel, but had also helped educate thousands of other people about the importance of cultural sensitivity and respect when visiting other countries.